In this video, I'm going to go through how you might check a mistake or how you might pick up on some of the mistakes or errors that could be in the BIM model. Before I do, I just want to address pile caps here. So we measured the pile with the pile caps. Now, again, I got a query on this. I put in the pile name, or pile cap name is pile 500 millimeter diameter, which is fine. And then I put in the pile cap as 500 by 500 by 400. Now, if you navigate to the piles, you'll see, if I just go down to foundations, that the actual pile cap itself is 500 by 400 by 500. Now, that doesn't make a difference. It's just that I switched the 400 to 500. In terms of what's going on here, in terms of the mapping, it's all fine. The 400 is the depth, and the 500 is I suppose, the length by breadth as such. So everything is fine in there, but if you want to change them, you can by just clicking the little edit and put the 400 in front of the 500. So I don't know if that confused any of you, but again, it's there for you just to double check and change if you want. But it's fine as is. It doesn't really make a difference in terms of the calculations. The calcs and the quantity should be the same. So I'm going to navigate. I'll just click the show all objects here. I'm going to navigate to my isolated pad foundations that are here holding up, I suppose, the columns that hold up the ramps to either side. So let's isolate them. Navigate to my browser. Go to my structure foundations and click on my pad foundation. I think this is them. So there we are. There's, I believe, 6 on this side and 6 on this side. And they're holding up, as I said, those columns. And those columns, in turn, are, I suppose, providing load for the ramp. Okay, so let's do a calculation on these, or let's do our quantification on these. So let's select one of them. Again, as I said, you don't necessarily need to do this, but doing so, when you click the plus button up here, in it comes. So it's a 1500 by 1500 by 750. So let's just put pad in front of that, pad foundation. And that tells me enough. BIM quantity again, as I said before, and give it a color. So the primary output, what we're really looking for from these, obviously, is the volume. And then I'm going to click my classification. It's in the substructure. And then my unit of measure is meter cubed, which would be volume. And then my formula that comes up here, default, is volume, but let's just type it in, and we're going to create a mapped BIM object. So once I've got the item selected here, I should be able to see the properties. And once I type in volume, I can see that the object property is in there. Click that, and to double check it, you've done all this before, you can click your lines here, scroll down, view more, and you see the volume in is there at 0.5. Now we'll leave that for the moment because that looks a little bit small compared to the size of the foundation. But let's go ahead and continue on with the outputs here. So add an additional output. Let's add formwork to this pad foundation. Classification, substructure, meter square this time. Now this time it's not going to be an area, it's going to be my length. Once I start typing it in, length multiplied by 2, so either side, and then I'll put brackets around that, and then I'm going to add my width, so I'm getting my perimeter times 2. So that's the other side, so that'd be 2 times 1.5, 2 times 1.5. And then brackets around the outside, and I'm going to be multiplying that, obviously, by the thickness. So start typing that in. Or height, doesn't really matter. So length times 2 plus width times 2 multiplied by thickness. Now, once I type all that in and click over here onto my model mappings, I'll be able to map to those. So length, let's see if there's a length. There is pad length, so click on that just to see. Yep, 1500. And then pad width, so that should also be 1500. There it is. And then the thickness, let's type thickness in there. I don't have thickness. Is there? Well, there we are, foundation thickness. So let's double check that one. And the foundation thickness is 0.75 or 750. So that's fine. So that is my that's my formwork. And then I'm going to click rebar as an additional output. And we've done all this before, you should be well used to it. This is a fairly easy one to calculate, but there is an error in it, so that's why we're doing it. Rebar is tons, and this time it's going to be volume, which I've already calculated, volume to volume, which is in there, multiplied by weight by volume. Now, I can't remember what I put in there in terms of kind of a weight or what you might want to put in there. Let's say I put in 300, as in my weight per volume of steel rebar in the foundation. So 300 kg per meter cubed. Now that looks okay. So let's say, for example, I went ahead and saved that and then went and did some takeoff. So click on my pad foundation just to make sure, highlight them all. There's 12 of them. And I get 6 meters cubed of concrete, 1.8 tons of rebar, 54 meters squared of formwork. Now, that looks a bit low to me. So I picked up an issue here. I've got 12 of them. If I even did a little calc, brought up my calculator, and took one of them, 1.5 times 1.5 multiplied by 0.75. So 1.68 multiplied by 12 is 20.25 meter cubed, not 6. So that is low. Now, I think this is just one. Maybe there's a couple of them that should be that could be an issue with, but this is a good example of why you might want to calculate a couple of different ways. So there's an issue there. I believe the formwork's okay, but the volume and obviously the rebar is incorrect because it works off the volume. So I'm going to go back and click my edit here. And I'm going to do just a double check. I'm going to click a plus here, and I'm going to do a volume check. And I'm going to calculate the volume. Again, same process, meters cubed, but I'm going to calculate the volume of my length, which I've already mapped to, my width, which I've already mapped to, and my thickness, which I've already mapped to. Okay, so there we go. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save that, and I'm going to click on it and see what my volume check comes up as. So I can see that the volume of the BIM object is 6 meters cubed, BIM object dimension, but down here I've got a volume check and that's 20.25. Now that one is correct because I've kind of double checked it. So given that this one is the actually more correct one, or the correct one, this 1.8 is incorrect because that's worked off this. So I need to actually change my rebar. Now you could do a rebar, an additional rebar check and do that, but I'm just going to change the original one here. So what I might do is go into my volume. You can type this stuff in again. I'm going to copy that, my volume check. I'm going to delete that and I'm going to paste it in there. And then I'm going to put brackets around it. So the length, width, by thickness. Now you could have just typed it in, and I'm going to multiply that then by the weight by volume. Okay, so all I changed there in the rebar was I changed what was volume, map to volume, to map to length times width times thickness, because for whatever reason it's not coming out as correct, and I'll show you again where that is. So I'm going to click save. So that 1.81 now is changed to 6 tons, which makes sense. So this volume is incorrect. What you could do is you go back and delete it just to make sure that, I suppose, or leave it in, it doesn't really matter, but make sure that you know that you're going to go to the volume check, or you could change the volume check up here as the primary output and then delete the volume, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to click on this, right click, show the properties, and you'll see down here the last item is the volume of 0.5 meter cubed, and that's what I mapped off, and that one cannot be right by doing a little check of that object. So 1.5 by 1.5 by 0.75 is not 0.5. So I don't know what's happening there. Quite possibly just some sort of calculation error when the export happened, or in the Revit model, or something the architect did. So this is a good example of the fact that you have to interrogate your model, you have to validate it, and you have to double check your quantities. You still are the owner of those quantities, and you are the calculator of those quantities. Just because you got in the BIM model, you can't point the finger at the architect and say something is incorrect. So I've done a check there, and you'll notice in other object properties and other takeoff items, I'm doing similar checks. And once I export that now, I can link to those quantities. So that's that in terms of pad foundations. So we've done quite a few of those quantities, and what you'll need to do now is go ahead and utilize that knowledge and finish out the rest of them that are in that model.